Hey everybody, it's Matt. I'm doing a follow-up to a video request asking me what am I currently playing in my lists for Wave 2 for my combiner teams. And I wanted to show you guys before Wave 3 drops and show you how the decks have changed a bit and how the list may have a similar feel to certain types of builds out there, and kind of show you what I've been running. Now, I have posted a lot of actual deck techs, and as I've played the game, the more matches that I've played, events I've been to, and tournaments, I've realized that you kind of have to alter your deck to the meta that you play against. But these are my favorite builds of these combiner teams that I run. Now, heads up, there is no Volcanicus anywhere here because Volcanicus is not for me, and I decided to go ahead and talk about the other 5 combiner teams that I've been running. So we're going to go ahead and show you guys the first team, which is one of my favorites to play, but it's not my favorite, is the Aerial Bots. Aerial Bots and Superion. In this deck here, we're going to be running a little bit of a new list. It is slightly changed from my original build, as I've added about 6 to 7 cards and taken about 6 to 7 out. Same number, right? So let's go ahead and talk about it. First of all, I am now running 3 Aerial Bot Enigmas in this deck because Espionage is a card that exists, and so is Disruptive Entrance. And any way that Mirage from Sentinels can get this out of your hand is super annoying. So running 3 of these so that making sure that I can combine with Superion, it is necessary. Next is 1 copy of Espionage so that I can alter and mess with my friends or my opponent's hand and get something out of their hand that is vital to them winning the game. Next is 2 copies of Infernal Breath. Infernal Breath is here to tap down Fireflight or one of your other combiners to do a little bit of direct damage and force them to attack into Fireflight, foiling their next attack plan. We have 3 copies of Marksmanship, another direct damage action. I almost said spell, which is funny. That does 2 damage to a character in their bot mode as long as you have a ranged character on the battlefield. So make sure you check for that before you play it. 3 more actions are Pep Talk, lets you draw 2 cards. Who doesn't like filling up their hand? Security Checkpoint, another card to mess with your opponent's hand. This one makes your opponent and yourself discard all your upgrades, so this could really help you get ahead if you're playing a lot of actions in your hand and don't have any upgrades out. Next is going to be 1 copy of Smelt to smelt off one of those pesky upgrades that's annoying you. 3 copies of The Bigger They Are to give Pierce 4 and make your little boys big boys. And last but not least is 1 copy of Vaporize. These are the new actions that I've been playing. They've slightly altered a bit. I've taken out Disarm. I've added taken out Heavy-Handed in place for just running all The Bigger They Are. More direct damage and a bit more stuff to mess with people. For upgrades, I'm running 3 Armored Hovercraft for that, for just pinging away at someone for direct damage. 1 Energon Axe for the Pierce 2, and putting this on Superion late game is awesome. 3 copies of Field Communicator to place down on my specialists, which are Alpha Bravo, and I believe Skydive is my other specialist. Yes. 3 copies of Handheld Blaster. I hate playing this card, but I kind of have to just to have the double blue pip. It is necessary to defend the oncoming attacks, especially against Dinobots. 1 copy of Nobles Blaster because you're going to be fetching it because so much tough that this deck contains. You're going to flip it and you're going to be able to pull it back. 3 copies of Reinforced Plating for that tough 2. 3 copies of Security Console. That gives you the plan to set up your defense and also let you draw more cards in case you're losing cards from your hand and you have to get those back in order to go ahead and swap with an Aerobot Enigma. 1 copy of Sparring Gear to fetch for an armor, and 2 copies of Thermal Weaponry, which is a fan favorite and also one of my favorite weapons because you're playing a whole lot of blue and Superion likes to pierce the hell out of his opponents. That is my Superion list. This is the final list before Wave 3 drops. I hope that you like it. Let's go on to the next one, which is Devastator. Alright, so for Devastator, there's a specific order that you want to actually send your guys out in. Most times when you start the game, you're going to have all these little, these 6 little fellas out in front of you. You want to make sure you send out your low health guys first, and you're attacking with them and discarding the cards that aren't actually going to help you at the moment, and then flipping them once they die in the KO zone. Because you're going to want to send out the low health guys first, Mixmaster, Bone Crusher, Scavenger, Long Haul, Hook, and then Scrapper. Always make sure that you flip Scrapper the first turn so that you can get that extra counter on your tower when your opponent KOs one of your Constructicons. Don't really bother attacking with them in their bot mode. They're not really that good in bot mode. They're mostly there to fill up your discard pile to power up that tower. So let's talk about the actions. This deck, as most Constructicon decks, almost all play the same list. It hasn't changed much since my video about a couple weeks ago. So 3 Constructicon Enigmas to heal Devastator and also turn him into the big menacing dude. 3 copies of Pierce of Tyranny because we're playing a lot of bold in this deck. We want to make sure that we're going ahead and getting those double orange flips. And the Reckless Charge is next. Reckless Charge is static damage. Though your characters have low health, they can survive just one of these to send them out and give them a bit more damage against your opponents, because no matter what, they're not going to survive most oncoming attacks, so it's best to kind of just buff those guys up. I was playing Static Laser of Ironhide, but I found that Power Punch was a bit better, and I was playing All Out Attack instead of Reckless Charge, and I found that Reckless Charge just did a better job. So 3 copies of Supercharge for that bold 3 baby. 3 copies of Treasure Hunt to fetch and search for the upgrades so you can put them on your Constructicons and swing for big damage. And 3 copies of Work Over Time to refill your hand when it gets empty from discarding to building that tower. With this card over here called Builder's Tools. 3 copies of this guy because why not make your tower big so when you heal with Devastator you have an actual fighting chance against most competitive decks. 3 copies of Bashing Shield to knock off armor, because we don't really care too much about utilities right now. There's not a utility that's that threatening that can really cause you a lot of problems. And 3 more copies of Erratic Lightning, because we don't really care too much about defense. We just want to make sure we do that damage. 3 copies of Flamethrower for that bold 2. 1 Force Field to save you in a pinch. 3 copies of Grenade Launcher for that +4 damage. You have to play this card. If you're not, what can I say? 3 copies of Improvised Shield for that double orange, and 3 Power Punch. You can play Static Laser, but I think Power Punch is better. This is my final Wave 2 constructed list for Constructicons. They may be similar to other people's. I mean, Constructicons just play orange, so it's really not that complicated to play. All right, let's go ahead to the next one, which is going to be Predaking. All right, next we have the Predacons, or the Predaking, as I should say. I love this deck. It is probably one of the most ones that I play. It's not my favorite of the combiners, but I play this one quite a bit just to show that Predaking can stand up to a lot of these other competitive decks that people throw out there, and it really surprises them when this deck smashes them hard. But, I mean, what do I know? So let's talk about your guys. So on your first turn, you're going to want to make sure you flip Dive Bomb to snatch that action out of their hand. If you can, swing with Rampage. Next turn, you're going to go ahead and make sure that you attack with Headstrong and either flip Rampage to get the ability of to repair 1 damage if you KO someone, or flip Torox if you're not fighting against someone who's not repairing, so you can go ahead and plan 1. On your next turn, you're going to go ahead, and if Headstrong's still alive, he's still blocking for you, you can try to pick someone off with Razor Claw or continue the attack with the remaining Predacons that you wish to use in the battle. It really comes down to knowing when to attack and when to really play down those extra upgrades to do that extra damage. Now, in this deck, we are playing 1 copy of Espionage to mess with your opponent's hand, to fish out a Enigma, or to get away an action or upgrade that is causing a bit of problems, and you know that's going to be in their hand. You see them flip a Bashing Shield and then snatch it, and then you have an armor on like a Force Field, you make sure you Espionage that Bashing Shield out of their hand. 3 copies of Pep Talk. Who doesn't like to draw cards? Predacon Enigma to draw a card and play a upgrade, which is great. 3 copies of Reckless Charge to make your guys huge. You're going to see a lot of this card in almost all my lists because it is great. 3 copies of Swindled. Swindled is here so that you can play multiple upgrades on your turn. I love putting down an Energon Axe on my turn, and then playing Swindled, drawing into an Energon Axe, and then playing it again on Predaking once he's combined, because that's huge. It's 13 attack with whatever else you have on there. 3 copies of Treasure Hunt to fish for upgrades and Work Over Time to fill your hand back up. Plus, White Pips never hurt. 2 copies of Bashing Shield to knock those pesky opponent's armor off. Love having 3 Energon Axes in a deck. That blue flip is always great to save one of your guys. Plus, it hurts like hell. 1 Enforcement Baton to knock off an annoying weapon. It is pretty relevant in this deck, and it does come down to help at times. 3 Erratic Lightning because you guys have no defense anyways. 3 copies of Field Communicator specifically for Dive Bomb. If you're Predaking, toss this for another utility, which is not really in this deck. I mean, you can play Tooth and Claw, but I mean, that card's bad. 3 copies of Force Field to protect your dude. 3 copies of Grenade Launcher because everybody loves Grenade Launcher. And 3 copies of Scoundrel's Blaster for that Pierce 6 against Autobots when Predaking is combined. This is my Predaking list. Hasn't changed too much. I do love all the mixture of the pips. You notice that I'm not running any bold because I want the static damage to really smash your opponent and hit them. And relying on the unknown by having bold can really hurt building Predaking, and I found that this build is probably my favorite. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Sentinels. All right, so Sentinels are pretty special. If you have never played Sentinels before, you have to make sure that you have Optimus Prime on your team. Since we're playing an aggro list, we want Ironhide and Prowl, and our other guys, Hot Rod, Sunstreaker, and Mirage in the KO zone. On your turn 1, depending on what you draw and who you're facing, you're most likely going to flip Mirage. But sometimes it may help to flip Mirage on your second turn that comes up once their hand fills up. Once they kind of get an advantage and they draw into a card or they fetch a card back from a reveal with a green pip. This deck does not focus on combining as much, but you can combine if you are in an emergency. So let's take a look at the actions and see what we have here. So first on the list is 3 copies of Confidence. I love this card. It lets you draw into what you want to play, and having the action to draw 2, discard 2, dig for either an upgrade or another essential actions you need, and then play the action is fantastic. 3 copies of Espionage because we like to mess with our opponent's hand. 1 copy of One Shall Stand, One Shall Fall to finish off an opponent who's hiding or just to get that damage in so you don't have to waste an attack on them. 3 copies of Peace Through Tyranny for the double orange pip and also to KO one of your characters if you know that you can go ahead and finish them off. 3 copies of Press the Advantage to give your Autobots +2 attack and potential Decepticons -2 defense. 1 copy of Ramming Speed in case there is an upgrade that is causing issues. 2 copies of Reckless Charge to get that damage in. It is having your character's health is pretty much just a clock. And having Reckless Charge and killing your opponents before they can kill yours is pretty great. So I feel like Reckless Charge is relevant in this deck. 1 copy of Sentinel Enigma. If you do not want to combine, you can run another One Shall Stand, One Shall Fall instead of the Enigma. I like the potential to be able to combine if it comes up. 2 copies of Supercharge, Bold 3, and 2 copies of Treasure Hunt to dig for upgrades. Now, as of upgrades, we're playing 2 copies of Bashing Shield to knock off the armor that gets in the way. 3 copies of Combat Commands because who doesn't like doing multiple flips. 1 copy of Enforcement Batons, which is relevant, just like Predaking, to knock off a weapon that's causing you issues. 1 copy of Force Field to save you. I've found this card is incredibly vital. I also noticed that Steffon was playing this in his Sentinel list, and I was actually quite surprised. Like I think it's a great idea to keep play 1 of and protect your guys. There's been so many times where I've put a Force Field down and fold my opponent's attack instead of them playing an upgrade to get rid of the Force Field and delay an actual kill just because from that. So great card, and if you haven't seen his channel, it is s.akuma. You should check him out. He's a great player, nice guy. 3 copies of Grenade Launcher because +4 damage is great. 3 copies of Improvised Shield for those double orange pips. I love Power Sword, so I'm going to play Power Sword. Don't care what you say. This Bold 3 is great. All your characters are melee. Why not? And 3 copies of Static Laser of Ironhide because it's relevant because you're playing Ironhide. And having that +3 attack is just so good. Do remember, though, that once you actually change into Optimus Maximus, he's going to take 2 damage when you attack because he is no longer Ironhide anymore. This is my updated Sentinels list. It's probably similar because a lot of people play Sentinels, and most lists are similar. But I really like this list. I don't really play Energon Slingshot or Security Checkpoint or Handheld Blaster. I think those cards are wasted in this, and as much as people want to argue that they're blue in the face, I feel that this list is fantastic, and it really does generalize and take out most. I don't have any problems with bugs when I play this list, so maybe that's some food for thought. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about my last one, which is my favorite out of all of them. Yeah, you probably know who it is. Scoop. And the final deck is Menasor. I love Menasor. People are so surprised when I bring this guy to the table. He's just so much fun to play. And your flipping order really depends on, let's get these guys out of here. It really depends on how the game's going to go out, and I'm going to show you that before we start out. So, when you start with Menasor, on your first turn, you're going to go ahead and flip your character dead end. I know that tough one seems like you want to keep it, but don't. Flip dead end, get that extra card, send in off-road. Next turn, flip off-road to heal him. Then go ahead and send in either drag strip or breakdown. I kind of want to send in Breakdown because if you look over here, he's got a higher defense than Dead End or Drag Strip once they're in their other modes. So set in Dead End. Hopefully you get the double blue for the +2. Next turn, send in Drag Strip, flip Breakdown. That'll get you those 2 cards. Hopefully you draw them. And then if you're actually attacking anymore, you're going to want to flip Motormaster and then swing with these guys. And last but not least, flip Drag Strip for your final flip, because that 0 defense is not very good. Let's talk about the deck. So, this deck plays 1 copy of Espionage. As mentioned before, it's in this deck for the same other reason, to mess with your opponent's hand and take something out. 2 copies of Inferno Breath to specifically deal 3 damage. You're going to want to top down Motormaster or another character who's not currently attacking, doesn't have a very high attack, so you can get that direct damage down and hurt someone. 3 copies of Heavy Handed. You're going to toss this early game if you do draw it. There are lots of ways to draw their cards and specifically toss and swap, so Heavy Handed shouldn't be in your hand until late game when you have Menasor. 3 copies of Security Checkpoint for the double blue pip and the upgrade removal from someone's hand that can really help Menasor out and get an edge. 3 copies of Stunticon Enigma because you want to be able to combine, and also this draws you 2 cards once you've combined. For other actions, we have 1 copy of Smelt to get rid of an upgrade, 3 copies of Swindle to dig through your deck to play multiple upgrades on your turn, 3 copies of The Bigger They Are to do Pierce damage, Pierce 4, and 1 copy of Vaporize to get that pesky upgrade. As of for upgrades, we're playing 3 copies of Energon Slingshot because you have a team of mostly melee characters, and this will let you pick away at your opponents and do damage until Menasor actually drops down. 3 copies of Energon Axe because Menasor needs that Pierce and also getting that static buff. 3 copies of Force Field because we're not playing Reinforced Plating in this list, and dropping this down on Menasor late game or one of your guys to save them to force your opponent to deal with it is really disruptive and fantastic. 3 copies of Handheld Blaster. I hate playing this card in this deck, but the double pips are needed. 3 copies of Sparring Gear. For the Tough 2, I'm playing this over Reinforced Plating because Drag Strip needs it to draw his cards. Also, it's fetchable. 3 copies of Thermal Weaponry because I love this card and want to play it in all my decks that are blue. It gives you Pierce equal to the blue that you flip, and we're playing quite a bit of blue. And lastly, 2 copies of Stunticon Swagger because why not? It prevents your opponents from using Bold or Tough. Now, I will mention that if you do wish to play some more Pierce, you can swap the Handheld Blasters for Scoundrels Blasters, and if you don't want to use Energon Slingshots, you can swap them for Scoundrels Blasters. And that is my Menasor list. Hopefully, you guys like this video, and I just kind of want to show you an update of what I've been playing. Anyways, that is everything. Thanks so much for watching. I like doing viewer requested videos, and I hope that maybe these decks help you out and get you some spicy packs to maybe open at an event. Either way, have a great day, and don't forget to check out TopDeckTCG.com for all your Star Wars Destiny or Transformers the Trading Card Game singles. You can use promo code MATTERFOR to get 10% off your order and get some of these rad cards that I have right here. Anyways, that is everything, and till the next video, guys. Anybody going to Origins, have a great time, open lots of good stuff, and peace.